Good evening and welcome to the August edition of our free webinar series. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm really pleased to host Ross Austen with us today. Breathing is something that we do every minute of every day, but do we do it effectively? Do we do it from a good health perspective? And do we do it in a way that can actually aid performance if done well? These are all question marks. I can remember as a runner, sometimes in a race or a training session, I'd have somebody close to me that would just be breathing really hard. And you could tell straight away that they weren't breathing efficiently. They were breathing very inefficiently, and you could tell that you had them. You would beat them based on good breathing practices. So this is something that I'm really keen to learn more about. I personally have done yoga and qigong and tai chi, which all bring in certain aspects of breathing. For an athlete, though, a hard-headed athlete, trying to get them to do yoga and qigong and meditation even, can be quite a task. But what about functional breathing? What about actually bringing breathing exercises into their training regime? So that, I think, is a really good application. So with that, Ross, I hand over to you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Ian. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you everyone for your attention this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are in this world. I'm really excited to talk about functional breathing for everyday living and athletic performance. And it is integral because it is part of our autonomic nervous system. And we breathe, unbeknown to us, 26,000 times a day. So it's all about bringing that to an awareness and then improving it, not only for an athletic point of view, but also just from a well-being and managing stress and anxiety, improving sleep and those sorts of things. I always enjoy starting my presentations with a quote. So the first sign of neuromuscular overload is in the breath. So we can understand that people are struggling. It is shown within their breath. I also thought it might be useful for you guys to kind of have a little bit of a background in terms of my career and what brought me to breath work. So I studied sports and exercise science at the University of Bedfordshire. I really enjoyed the course there and got involved as much as possible when I was an undergrad. I had the opportunity to work with the Paralympic shooting squad ahead of World Championships. So looking at kind of the climatization. So believe it or not, people with spinal cord lesions, underneath that lesion, they actually struggle with sweating. The thermal regulation is hampered as a result. So we're looking at free cooling and the impact of that ahead of World Championships in Cyprus. And that was really cool. We've got a paper that I was a co-author on all around kind of that acclimatization ahead of competing in the heat. I kind of graduated and then went on to HFL Sports Science, which is now known as LGC, as a graduate scientist. And that's where I started putting my sports and exercise scientist kind of knowledge to the test. So yeah, screening sports nutrition products for drugs just to prevent what's called inadvertent doping. And obviously the likes of WADA recommend that athletes are choosing tested products as well. I've done a bit of modeling and film work, which has always been good fun. I've played, from a sporting point of view, played cricket for Malawi, East Midlands Senior County Rugby, and I was part of the GB Bobsleigh Development Squad ahead of the Pyeongchang Olympics. I didn't get the opportunity to represent my country. Unfortunately, I was plagued with injury, but I had an incredible experience training with some of the fastest people in the UK. And so that was great fun. I also launched a fermented foods business when I started work. So kombucha and water kefir, I've been producing that for 7 years now. I've got a dedicated production facility in my garage. I've got a little microbrewery, and I'm a huge cold water advocate. So I'm part of a group called the Icebreakers, where we swim all throughout the year, and it's all around mental health advocacy and the benefits of cold. I only qualified as breathwork instructor in the latter part of last year, So I've been really enjoying kind of educating individuals at corporate and a one-to-one point of view as well. And more so recently, I've joined Dorset and Wiltshire as an on-call firefighter. And breath is so important for managing your air in your tank, but also the stress of events of turning up to a house fire or factory fire and those sorts of things. So that's a little bit of a background to me. When it comes to functional breathing, there are three kind of things that are concerned. So we're talking about biochemistry, so breathing less air to improve the tolerance to carbon dioxide, and we'll go into that a little bit more as to why that is important. We have biomechanics, so breathing low to improve the recruitment of the diaphragm and breathing muscles. And then resonance, so frequency, or slowing the breath down to 6 per minute rather than the average of 9 to 22. And that the reason for this is it brings a nice balance to the autonomic nervous system. So the way you breathe during rest influences the way you breathe during physical exercise and sleep. If you have poor quality breathing during rest, you're likely to have disproportionate breathlessness during exercise and heavy breathing, snoring during sleep. And it's all through the nose. And the reason for this is there are 30 different functions that the nose provides when it comes to breathing that far outweigh breathing through your mouth. I'm not saying that's nose only. I'm saying nose most of the time when intensities get too high. So you can achieve 80 to 90% of your peak VO2, well, your VO2 max. And then sometimes you'll have to introduce your mouth because basically your body's chemoreceptors are reacting to too much CO2 in the body. But you can get there with training. And the reason why nasal breathing is so beneficial, it leads to 10 to 20% more oxygen uptake. So the extra resistance from the nose being a smaller surface results in better oxygenation of the blood. It also reduces exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. So I know in the UK during the winters, if people are running outside, they typically get dyed chests. But breathing through your nose actually warms and humidifies the air, so it prevents that from happening. And we also have many different hairs, and they're called cilia in our nose, that trap all the pathogens and bacteria. In fact, to the extent that I attended a camp for one of the pro cycling teams, and the doctor said, please don't abstain from picking your nose, ultimately because he's scared of getting everyone ill as a result of that, which I found quite funny. It obviously encourages diaphragmatic breathing as well. So the smaller surface area engages the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles and leads to better core stability as well as spinal stability. It can improve sleep. So on my course, I learned about mouth taping. And since then, I've been taping my mouth every night. So they have produced something called Myotape, which Patrick McCowan, the founder of Oxygen Advantage, makes. And basically, it's a tape that goes around your mouth, allows you to talk and drink if required. But I just use a bit of microporous tape, just a postage stamp across my lips. But I ended up snoring out the side of my mouth. So I actually put a piece right across the lips. And honestly, I feel much better when it comes to my sleep. And my watch is telling me that I get better REM sleep, so the rapid eye movement, which is the restorative phase of sleep. So that's something that you could try if you are a mouth breather, if you snore. So I don't get any kind of jabs in the ribs from my wife anymore, thankfully. So she's pretty happy as well. It does help improve performance. So we'll talk about buffering capacity and VO2 max in a moment. And this is an amazing compound that was discovered in 95 that you may well be aware of from a dietary point of view. So nitric oxide, we consume that within beetroot and rocket. Our nose or nasal cavity actually produces it. And it's got antimicrobial, antibacterial properties, but it's also potent vasodilator. So it helps the exchange and diffusion of oxygen. So that's the benefits of breathing through your nose. At this point, I am going to actually ask everyone to carry out a little assessment. So this is called the BOLT, or a controlled pause. And this is a real objective or subjective measure that can be performed every day to see where you are in terms of your tolerance to CO2. And really fascinating from a female point of view, depending on where you are within your menses, particularly within the luteal phase, you're producing more progesterone. Progesterone is a respiratory stimulant. And particularly in that phase, you're actually more prone to stress because you have a reactivity to CO2. So Doing this every day will show you whether you can push or pull back on the intensity of your exercise program, and it's not trainable. Well, based on some of the exercises that we'll be doing, you can improve it by 2 to 3 seconds every week, but it requires you to perform the exercises that we'll be going into. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to do it in their own time. What it entails is a normal breath in through your nose, a normal breath out through your nose. You then pinch and hold your nose. So if you've got a watch or a phone, now it's time to get it out. You then start your watch, and you go to your first distinct desire to breathe. So that's either a fluttering of the diaphragm, it's a contraction of the neck muscle. So really dial into listening to your body and that first distinct desire to breathe. When you get that, you press stop on your stopwatch, and we'll go into the results in a moment. So normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out. So you're not emptying your lungs, it's just a normal breath in, normal breath out. You then pinch and hold your nose, start your stopwatch, and then stop it as soon as you have that first distinct desire to breathe, and then we'll discuss the results in a moment. So I'll give you a minute or so to crack on with that. And if you cannot recover your breath within 2 minutes, you've gone a little bit too far, which is not a problem. So really dial into kind of your body responding to wanting to take a breath. Cool. I think we've all done it, but so looking at the results, I don't like the word dysfunctional. In actual fact, some statistics show that 50 to 80% of the population are dysfunctional breathers. I'd rather reframe it as suboptimal, so room for improvement. So if your bolt is anywhere between 25 seconds or lower, you are regarded as a suboptimal breather. Above 25 seconds, you're a functional breather, which is great because you've got a good tolerance to CO2 and those sorts of things. The MBT is the maximum breath hold test. We won't be performing that today, but if in your own time wanted to do that, it is looking at your upper limits of kind of CO2 tolerance. So all you're doing is a normal breath in, normal breath out, you pinch and hold your nose, and you go until you cannot go no more. So you really resist the urge to kind of take a breath. It can be uncomfortable, but you're looking at the comparison. So that is the BOLT and the MBT, a nice objective measure to see how you're tolerating CO2 and can be performed every day. So moving on to biochemistry. So I'm going to piece together the functional breathing aspects, so the biochemistry and the low and slow breathing. And why is biochemistry so important at improving? Well, the reason being is it is a catalyst for hemoglobin to release oxygen to the cells. So there's a scientist called Christian Bohr, who is a biochemist, and in 1904, he discovered that partial pressure of CO2 in the blood actually leads to either greater affinity to hemoglobin to oxygen. So if you can get comfortable with more CO2 in the system, it basically allows the hemoglobin, which is a protein within the red blood cell, to release your oxygen to your kind of cells and brain. And CO2 dissolved within the blood is actually regarded as carbonic acid, and that's the reason why you'll drop the pH, hence the reference there. Other things to consider are the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. So that is just reinforcing what Christian Bohr was talking about. This is the curve that he created. So getting used to more CO2 in the system shifts the curve to the right, which allows dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin. So that's just to reinforce that particular point. Other things, having CO2 in the system allows the dilation of arteries and carotids. So these are the arteries in the brain. And hyperventilating, so breathing hard and fast, actually reduces it by 50%. in the brain, which is fascinating. So the more we can get used to higher CO2 in the system, the better for the dilation of arteries and veins, which is incredible, really. So another kind of breathing exercise. So there's kind of theory and practical intertwined in these sessions, because I want you to be able to take some of the techniques away and be able to apply them in every day with your clients or with family and those sorts of things. So this particular exercise is called breathing recovery or many small breath holds. It is the objective of this exercise is to gently prepare the body for a tolerable feeling of breathlessness. So by holding the breath for short periods of time, the gas nitric oxide pools in the nasal cavity and the gas carbon dioxide slightly increases in the blood. Upon resumption of breathing, you carry the nitric oxide into the lungs, and as you breathe, the CO2 kind of builds in the system. So both gases play an important role in opening the airways, improving blood circulation, and allowing more oxygen to be delivered to the cells. So this exercise is ideal for warm-up as well as reducing stress, asthma symptoms, breathing recovery, so between sets of exercise. And so what I want you to do, we'll do this for about 2.5 minutes. So I want you to just follow along with my instructions. So all you would do. So what I want you to do is take a normal breath in through your nose and then out, and then you'll be holding your breath for 5 seconds. So just follow along with my instructions when it's start. So just where you are, so take a normal breath in through your nose, a normal breath out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose, and hold for 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go of your nose and breathe normally in and out of your nose for 10 seconds. Just breathe normally for 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose, out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose, and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you let go, breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for 10 seconds. So don't make any changes to your breathing, just breathe as normal. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you let go, breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for 10 seconds. So as you hold your breath, the nitric oxide is pooling in the nasal cavity. Breathing in after the breath hold will carry that nitric oxide into the lungs. They will help open the airways and improve oxygen uptake in the blood. You should not feel stressed during this exercise. If the air hunger is too much, then I encourage you to hold your breath just for 3 seconds and follow along. So again, take a normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you let go, breathe through your nose normally and breathe normally for 10 seconds. And we go again. So normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe normally for 10 seconds. Okay, last 2 rounds. So normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose, pinch and hold your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And breathe normally for 10 seconds. We'll bring that particular exercise to an end. But it's just a nice introduction into improving the biochemistry of breathing. So the next exercise we'll have is breathe light. So this is, again, normalizing biochemistry. It involves reducing the volume of air that you're taking into your body in order to create a tolerable hunger for air. So we want that tolerable hunger for air. This is a feeling that you'd like to take a slightly bigger breath or a feeling that you're not quite getting enough air. When you breathe less air than you did before you started the exercise, a feeling of air hunger is created. Achieving a slight or tolerable air hunger signifies that carbon dioxide is accumulating in the blood. So we're conditioning the body to get used to high levels of CO2 in the body and working on changing the set limits of our chemoreceptors. So if you've been a hyperventilator most of your life, your chemoreceptors, which are chemical receptors in the body, will be set to a certain level. So we need to reset them so they get more comfortable with CO2 in the system. So again, just follow along with my instructions. You can either close your eyes. If you're sitting, place your hands in your lap, however you feel most comfortable. But I want you to imagine a piece of string gently pulling you upwards, not to attention, but imagine that space in your ribs widening. And with your mouth closed and jaws relaxed, breathe normally in and out through your nose. What I'd like you to do is observe your breath as it enters and leaves your nose. So focus on the airflow as it moves in and out of your nose. Feel the slightly colder air entering your nose and feel the slightly warmer air leaving your nose. Really concentrate on the air as it enters and leaves your nose. I'd like you to use this as a measure of your concentration. For how long can you hold your attention on your breath before your mind wanders? If you notice the mind wandering a lot, this exercise will considerably help improve your concentration. You may feel your chest move up and down, or you might feel your tummy move in and out. At this point, don't try to adjust anything. Simply become aware of your breathing. When you're able to follow your breathing, take a slow breath in through the nose and allow a slow, gentle, relaxed breath out. Slow down the speed of the air as it enters and leaves your nose. Breathe in a slow and gentle manner. Breathing should be so light, quiet, and still. Slow down your breathing so you feel hardly any air entering and leaving your nostrils. Your breathing should be so quiet that the fine hairs within your nostrils do not move. Breathe so lightly that there is hardly any turbulence inside your nose. At the top of the inhale, bring a feeling of total relaxation to your body and allow a slow, soft, relaxed breath out. The air should leave your body slowly and effortlessly. It is very important not to consciously interfere with your breathing muscles or restrict your breathing during this exercise. Don't tense your stomach to reduce your breathing. The breathing volume should now be less than what it was before you started the exercise. So the goal of this is to want a hunger for air, is to have a feeling that you'd like to take a bigger breath. So once again, take a very slow breath in, almost as if you're not breathing. As you breathe out, bring a feeling of relaxation to the body, allowing the air to leave the body effortlessly. So a slow breath in and a relaxed breath out. By taking a slower breath in and allowing a relaxed slow breath out, carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood. This creates a feeling that you would like to take in more air. This is valuable feedback that you're performing the exercise correctly and reducing your breathing volume towards normal. Just a reminder that it's normal for the mind to wander, and as soon as you notice the mind wandering, bring your attention back to your breathing. Once again, take a slower breath into your lungs, and as you breathe out, bring a feeling of total relaxation to the body, allowing the air to leave the body effortlessly. The air hunger you feel during this exercise should be tolerable. If you notice that your breathing rhythm is getting fast or chaotic, then the need for air is too much. In this case, stop the exercise and breathe normally for half a minute, and then resume gentle, light breathing to create that tolerable need for air. Don't deliberately interfere with your breathing muscles. Don't hold your breath. Don't freeze your breathing. Instead, allow your breathing to soften with a very slow breath in and a gentle, relaxed, slow breath out. Once again, take a slow breath into your lungs, and as you breathe out, bring a feeling of total relaxation to the body, allowing the air to leave the body effortlessly. Okay, when you're ready, bring yourself back into the room. Hopefully you're feeling nice and relaxed. Well, that is one of the exercises that you can perform before bed to kind of get you ready to sleep. Out of interest, you may have noticed that the temperature in your hands have got a little bit warmer. That's showing the vasodilation of those arteries and veins in that particular area. You may have had saliva build up in your mouth. That's signifying that the rest and digest part of the autonomic nervous system is engaged. And also, hopefully, you're feeling a bit more relaxed from a mental state point of view. You can perform that with kids. You can be a cat and they can breathe really lightly. And if you hear them breathing, you can pounce on them. So that's a nice little game if you've got kids. Other ways of performing the exercise is using your finger as a barometer. So if you place that below your nose, what you want to be doing is not sensing any of your breath on that particular finger. So really lightening up the breath, slowing the breath. So using the finger as a barometer. Other ways of doing this, and I would like to encourage you all to do this, to just see the effect of CO2 on breathing. What I want you to do is cup your hands in front of you. We won't be breathing in for 4 and out for 6. But what I want you to do is take tiny breaths in and out with your arms cupped in front of you. So just and everyone will respond very differently depending on their tolerance to CO2. So if we all start doing that, people will kind of stop at different times because it becomes just too much. You're recycling the CO2 into the system fundamentally, and then your chemoreceptors will not enjoy it. So we'll just do that for a little while, and then we'll move on. Well, people on my screen seem to be able to tolerate it quite well. We'll move on to the next exercise, which is box breathing. So just to kind of reiterate, box breathing was introduced by the military to bring a balance between the autonomic nervous system, so the rest and digest, fight and flight, the ability to respond but also be relaxed. So it's a nice little exercise. We won't necessarily perform it today, but you can what you can do is different levels of breath hold. So again, it's allowing carbon dioxide to build in the system with the breath holds. A 4-second hold is a nice starting point. You can increase it to 5, 6, 7, 8, even all the way up to 10, as long as you're comfortable with that. And with training, you can get better at it. But yeah, it's utilized mostly by the military to help with the vagus nerve and those sorts of things. So relaxing the individuals. So moving on to more so the breathing low and slow. So we encourage you to slow your breath down and deepen that breath. And the reason being is it increases the oxygen uptake during rest and physical exercise. So there's something called minute ventilation, which is the volume of air absorbed into the body each minute, and is calculated by multiplying the respiratory rate by the tidal volume. So the minute ventilation is normally 4 to 6 liters. It depends on the individuals. And one thing to bear in mind is we do lose a bit of air within the nasal cavity, the throat, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. The rest of the breath reaches the alveoli, and that's where the gas exchange happens. So this is just to reiterate that. So respiratory rate, number of breaths per minute, tidal volume, the air that enters the lungs in one inhalation. So if you look at it from a breath point of view, so if we take 12 breaths per minute, and they all contain 500 mils, and then that's 6 liters, we're only receiving 4.2 liters at the alveoli. So your 12 times 500 minus the 150, which is lost air, and that is within the dead space. So the air that is within the areas that isn't absorbed by the alveoli is regarded as dead space. By reducing the volume of air remaining in this dead space, we can improve respiratory efficiency by 10 to 20%. That's one of the statistics that we discussed at the very beginning due to with the benefits of nasal breathing. So we're looking at minute ventilation. So if we slow the breath down to 6 breaths, we're taking larger breaths, so 1,000 mils per breath. There's 6 liters of air entering our lungs. We lose that 150, so we get 5.1 liters of available air. So that's a 20% increase in respiratory efficiency by slowing that breath down and having bigger breaths. So that's why it's so beneficial, rather than breathing hard and fast in the upper part of the chest where we'll probably lose a lot of, or not be able to absorb oxygen. Slowing that breath down and bringing it deep into the lungs will allow us to absorb more oxygen as a result, which is really beneficial. So just to kind of reiterate that, slow breathing consists of reducing the number of breaths per minute, so increasing ventilation efficiency and arterial oxygenation with each inspiration, increasing the volume air that reaches the alveoli where gas exchange takes place. Respiratory efficiency is important for sports, altitude, respiratory and cardiac disorders, and the exercises designed to slow the breathing rate can reduce dyspnea and improve performance during exercise. And to that, we're also then going to move on to the next exercise. So this is focusing on the biomechanical side of things. So the diaphragm is your breathing muscle. It's important for postural control, and it functions through its generation of intra-abdominal pressure. During inhalation, the diaphragm moves downwards and the intra-abdominal pressure is generated. Think about it like an inflated balloon within your chest cavity. This has stabilizing effects on the spine and pelvis. So when breathing patterns are healthy, there is a lateral expansion of the lower 2 ribs. This only occurs if there's sufficient generation of intra-abdominal pressure acting through the zone of apposition to push the ribs out. So again, just follow along with my instructions. What I would like you to do is imagine a piece of string pulling up towards the ceiling, not standing to attention, but upright. That space in your ribs widening. And this time, I'd like you to place your hands on either side of your body on the lower 2 ribs. And I'd like you to bring air deep into the lungs. So breathe in and feel your ribs expanding outwards. And as you breathe out, feel your ribs moving inwards. It takes intra-abdominal pressure to push the ribs outwards. So taking fuller breaths, but fewer of them, improves a larger tidal volume. So the fuller breath will stimulate the vagus nerve as well. Again, as you breathe in, feel your lower ribs moving outwards. And as you breathe out, feel your lower ribs moving inwards. Ideally, during an inhalation, as the diaphragm moves downwards and the intercostal muscles move outwards, this generates an outward movement to the front of the abdomen, sides, and back. As you breathe in, feel your ribs expanding outwards, and as you breathe out, feel your ribs moving inwards. There's no need to hear your breathing during this exercise, so breathe slowly, lightly, and deeply. So remember, as you breathe in, feel your ribs expanding outwards, and as you breathe out, feel your ribs moving inwards. Sometimes this is just an exercise to help with the mind-muscle connection. We struggle a little bit to begin with, but it's just in introducing the biomechanical aspects of breathing. So making sure you draw that breath deep into the lungs by engaging the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. So you're moving it from upper chest into the lower parts of your abdomen. So we'll bring that exercise to an end, and we'll move on to cadence breathing. So the exercise that we performed at the very beginning, the bolt, this will increase as you focus on breathing light, breathing slower, and those sorts of things. So the respiratory rate will naturally decrease, and there's a natural pause following exhalation as a result. So when the bolt score is 40 seconds, the typical respiratory rate is 6 to 8 breaths per minute, which is a good range to be in. So changing the cadence of breathing to 6 breaths per minute helps provide numerous benefits, including breathing efficiency. With a reduced respiratory rate, a greater volume of air per minute, a rise at the alveoli. This is because less volume of air is lost to that dead space that we discussed earlier. There is substantial body of research supporting improved heart rate variability for a variety of disorders and for performance enhancements. So both heart rate variability and baroreflexor sensitivity are maximized when respiration is slowed down to 6 breaths per minute. So cadence of 6 breaths per minute also helps to reduce chemoresensitivity. to carbon dioxide, resulting in a higher BOLT score. And for people with a strong fear of suffocation, cadence breathing may be a better option, as increased carbon dioxide is better tolerated, resulting in a reduced fear response. The synchronicity of heart rate variability and respiration is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So in healthy people, the heart rate increases during inspiration and decreases during expiration. That's why a longer exhale releases acetylcholine, tells the body it's safe. So really focus in on those long exhales if you're stressed and worried about certain things. So respiratory sinus arrhythmia indicate functioning of the autonomic nervous system, is an index of parasympathetic tone, and greater vagus nerve traffic will increase respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So slowing down the respiratory rate will naturally result in an increased tidal volume. This, along with the diaphragmatic breathing, significantly increases respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So again, I'd like you just to follow along with my exercises and my instructions. Close your eyes, place your hands on your lap if you'd like, and what you'd like to do is I want you to kind of, as you breathe in, feel your ribs moving outwards, and as you breathe out, feel your ribs moving inwards. To pace your breathing, I'd like you to breathe in for a count of 4 seconds and to breathe out for a count of 6 seconds. So follow along. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 2, 3, 4, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great stuff. So we'll bring that little exercise to an end, but that's just indicating that if you breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6, that will be your kind of 4 to 6 breaths per minute. So it's something that you can introduce on a regular basis if you need to. Now we're going to up the ante a little bit. We won't do intermittent hypercapnia hypoxic training today, but this gives you a nice insight into the benefits of it. So what it means is, like HIIT training, it's intermittent. So between there's breaks and rest. Hypercapnic is ultimately saying high CO2. Hypoxic is low oxygen training, and it's really incredible in terms of the benefits of it. So it's gaining a lot of attention, and in 2017 it was actually added to the altitude training methods, because if you can drop your oxygen saturation to around 87%, it's showing that you're training at altitude, so 3,000 feet. And there's loads of different benefits as a result of this. So these little exercises are amazing to help improve athletic performance. And a particular researcher called Dr. Xavier Wurons is an expert in this particular area. And he showed improved performance in several different sports, so running, cycling, swimming, and team sports, by applying apneas on exhales. So we're not holding our breath on an inhale, we're holding our breath on an exhale rather than an inhale. The reason being is it normalizes everyone's lungs in terms of not having much air there, because if you breathe in, you've obviously got to process that air. So breathing out means that there's less air to process, and therefore CO2 can build up faster and O2 can be saturated or utilized quicker as well. So these are some of the research papers that have showing the benefits of apneas in training. So in one study, 18 swimmers, including 10 men and 8 women, were divided into 2 groups. The first group only took 2 breaths per length. The second group took 7. And the results showed an improved running economy of 6% for the first group. So those breath holds improving the economy of running. Then we're going back to Wurons, who performed a particular exercise with 21 national professional rugby players in a competitive season for 4 weeks. And they practiced 8 sessions of repeated 40-minute sprints with breath holding. So 11 people were part of that group, and then 10 were just mouth breathers. And what they did was they took 2 normal weekly training sessions with high intensity, and they were removed from the experimental group to prevent injury and reduce the risk of overtraining. The 2 removed sessions included anaerobic lactic cycling and maximal aerobic running. So those 2 sessions were removed and replaced with these kind of apnea sessions. In the first 2 sessions, they completed 2 sets of 80 times 40 meter sprints with a 3-minute break between each set. So then gradually they increased the repetitions by an average of 2 repetitions per week over the 4-week period. So 8 40-meter sprints were in the final session. And what they were doing is departing every 30 seconds. So they would exhale, hold the breath, and sprint for 40 meters, and then they'll finally inhale and then breathe normally for 30 seconds, and then they'll repeat that. How they evaluated the kind of exercise itself was a repeated sprintability test. So that was performed on both of the groups at the end. And there were the results speak for themselves, really. So the experimental group significantly increased the repeated sprints. So you would go until you can't go no more. So they went from 9.1 repetitions to 14.9, and the control group marginally increased from 9.8 to 10.4. So the researchers concluded that repeated sprints after an exhalation are an effective way to create hypoxic stress and improve repeated sprint ability performance in team sports, which is a nice way to introduce kind of things that aren't going to tax the body too much. We've got to be aware of too much stress on the system, and introducing these within a team sports environment, and any environment actually that has athletic performance required. So this is something that could be considered when it comes to sprinting. There's a gentleman called Luis de Oliveira, who is a world-renowned Brazilian track and field coach, and he used apnea techniques to train 2 Olympic athletes, Joaquim Cruz and Mary Decker, and between them, he set 6 world records in the 800-meter and other running events. There's a gentleman called Emil Zatopek, who is described by the New York Times as perhaps one of the greatest long-distance runners of all time. And he incorporated breath-holding techniques into his regular training. So he had a long road with poplar trees along it. And on the first day, he held his breath until he reached the 4th poplar tree. On the second day, he held his breath until he reached the 5th poplar tree, increasing the distance of his hold by 1 poplar tree each day until he could hold his breath for the entire tree line, which is incredible. On occasions, he pushed a little bit too much and he did faint. But incredibly, in 1952, at the Helsinki Olympics, he brought much glory and admiration to himself, where he won the 5,000 meters, the 10,000 meters, and he decided to enter the marathon. And he actually won that with never actually running that distance before, which is really impressive. Now, the reason why you get so many benefits from intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training is we have our spleen, and that contracts, and our spleen contains about 8% of our body's red blood cells. So holding your breath for 3 to 5 repetitions, you don't need to go beyond 5 repetitions. There's a diminishing return. So 3 to 5 really strong breath holds will contract that spleen, releasing the red blood cells into the system, improving the oxygen carrying capacity of our blood. In addition to that, there's also evidence around how it increases EPO production, so erythropoietin, 4 days later, and again improves our tolerance to CO2. So these are things that can be integrated into training. And really fascinating, when I first started doing it, I could only hold my breath for 30 steps. And I'll talk you through how you do it, actually, before we look into that. So what I would encourage you all to do is, we won't do this now. Sometimes if in a classroom environment, I get people up walking around the table, or if we're outside, we could do this. So you'll do a little warm-up exercise, so the 2.5 minutes of the 5-second holds. You'll then move on to the preparation for simulation of altitude training. So this also is a nice way to kind of clear the mind. So what you'll do is a normal breath in, normal breath out. You pinch and hold your nose, and you hold your breath for 10 to 15 paces. You'll rest for half a minute to a minute to recover, and then you'll proceed to do the next repetition for 5 reps. You then move on to simulating altitude training. So I did it in a little bit of a different way when I'm at home, and there's all the benefits as well on the right-hand side. So what you do is a normal breath in, normal breath out. You start walking until you have that strong desire to breathe. You then start jogging because that distracts your mind. It also uses more oxygen as a result and produces more CO2 because CO2 is obviously a metabolic waste product. Once you can't go no more, you stop and you take 6 small breaths. So and then you'll take 12 to 18 normal breaths, so deep into the lungs, and then you'll repeat that process for 3 to 5 repetitions. How I do it is slightly different. So on a morning walk, I would typically do my kind of warm-up breaths. I'll then move on to my strong to medium or medium to strong kind of breath holds, so the 10 to 15 paces. And then I'll go until I can't go no more. So I move on to the simulation of altitude training. And when I first started, I could only get 30 steps, but I got up to 100 steps recently, which is incredible. So just by training the breath and getting more comfortable. It is hard. You have to be resilient, but ultimately that is training and improving our breathing mechanics. So just to recap, so functional breathing has 3 fundamental aspects. So biochemical, so improving your tolerance to CO2 by breathing lighter. Biomechanical, so engaging the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, has various benefits in terms of the vagus nerve, heart rate variability, and also slowing those breaths down. So 4 to 6 breaths is the optimum that we should be looking for. It should all be centered around nasal breathing, not nasal breathing all the time, but most of the time. We can get to 80 to 90%. And if you're a runner, let your nose dictate the pace, ultimately. We are obsessed with splits, but if we can regress, we can progress forward. And believe it or not, your nose, you might think that it's blocked at the moment, but the more you use the nose, the more it will stay unblocked. So if you don't use it, you lose it fundamentally. So hopefully that was really useful. I'm going to kind of say thank you so much for your attention this evening. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts. Happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ross. That was really interesting. I'm quite motivated now to try some breath work myself and try and slip back into some running. So let's go into a Q&A. I've got 3 already. Any thoughts that you want to discuss, just put them in the chat box at the moment. So Scott asked earlier, he's interested in hints for race day breathing to decrease overstimulation. So he works with quite elite triathletes. So how do we use the breath to calm the nervous system going into a race?
Yeah, so you also want the nervous system to be alert in that. So slowing the breath down. So those breathing light exercises that we did, so making them kind of really focus in and dial into the breath, lighting the breathing, slowing it down, will kind of bring a feeling of relaxation to them. And then actually they show that then the stronger breath holds will prepare them for exercise. So you could do the breathe light for a little bit and then move into the 10 to 15 paces and then the real strong breath holds. The reason being is you're activating the spleen to release the additional red blood cells, which improves their oxygen carrying capacity, which will help with their performance. So kind of, I suppose it all centers also around sleep health, hydration, and just making sure that they're prepared for the races. I think if they prepare well, that will hopefully help their nerves as well.
Thanks, Ross. Paul asked about sleep apnea. He works with strength and power athletes, and he's been seeing it in his strength athletes recently.
Yeah, no, apneas are quite common with individuals, rugby players with large necks. It happens quite regularly, and there's lots of evidence about the detrimental effect of apneas in sleep. So if you can encourage them to do the breathe light before bed and possibly taping their mouth, if they're a little bit worried about that, try and encourage them to do it during the day. And you can utilize myotape. I can share the link around the myotape. Which allows obviously them to be able to, but it doesn't work well with facial hair. That's the only problem with males. But that microporous tape is extremely beneficial. So that could be a way of helping them breathe through their nose. It prevents their breathing then to the metabolic needs rather than over breathing, which is something that we see sometimes at night, and hence why the bigger breaths and holds as a result. That's because basically the airways is collapsing here, but if you're breathing through your nose, it's lighter, and they should have a better night's sleep as a result of that.
So Rani asks, looking to help athletes in performance and recovery through breathing. So yeah, focus on performance, which we've kind of talked a wee bit about, but also on recovery strategies.
Yeah, interestingly, I tried to find some information on concussion in sport, particularly contact sports, because I wanted to try and work with some rugby teams. And there's not much published information, but if you think about it in terms of improving your tolerance to CO2 and the delivery of oxygen, so there's actually oxygen therapies now to help with recovery. But fundamentally, I think our physiology, if we can adapt our physiology to improve the delivery of oxygen through CO2, there's even carbon dioxide therapies, which is really fascinating as well. But I think the breath holds particularly will help with retaining some of the trained benefits. So we detrain really quickly within 2 weeks, as we've seen in terms of research, but introducing some breath holds into kind of recovery processes will help retain what they have from an athletic performance. So that's something that you can do if you're doing rehab sessions. They don't necessarily have to be doing them running or walking. You can actually do them just sitting in front of the TV. So those are a few techniques. You can encourage them to do it twice per day as well in terms of helping that recovery piece.
Okay, we've got Brian asking about oxygen advantage compared to Power Breathe. And I know Power Breathe's been on the market for a long time. In terms of respiratory muscle training, have you got any thoughts on that?
I have. So Power Breathe encourages you to breathe through your mouth. That's the only thing that I would be kind of wary of. Now, Oxygen Advantage actually has a mask over both your mouth and nose, and you can manage, you can improve resistance with that particular mask. But the fact that your nose is smaller than your mouth means there's a better engagement of the diaphragm. So I would try and abstain from utilizing the Power Breathe because of the fact that it's encouraging utilizing your mouth. So if you can stick to nasal breathing, look at the Oxygen Advantage mask because it allows you to actually breathe through your nose. But then if you are struggling, you can introduce your mouth depending on how intense that particular exercise is.
Okay, so David works with spinal injuries, many unable to use their diaphragm due to injury. So can you comment on the benefits of nose breathing to improve oxygen absorption?
Goodness, yeah. So I suppose that's a little bit out of my remit, but in terms of obviously the nose and engaging the diaphragm, it's super beneficial. So if you can get the guys to kind of lighten up and really kind of dial into that mind to muscle connection. Sometimes it's hard. I don't know if everyone was able to kind of focus in on lowering the diaphragm. So it may take a couple of attempts and reinforcing that nasal breathing and slowing the breath down and lightening that breath up for them.
And then Caroline's asking a question that's very much in line with my clients. I have a lot of clients who are chronically stressed, who I encourage to extend their breathing, especially that out breath. How long can it take to really calm the sympathetic nervous system in the long term?
Well, as we know, our lifestyles, our foot is firmly planted on the sympathetic side of the autonomic side of the nervous system. So alcohol, lack of sleep, caffeine, you name it, kind of we don't ever bring the other side back into balance. And that's why it's really important in order to kind of look at not only breathing, this one aspect of the autonomic nervous system. For me, it's fundamental about getting sleep right. It's about time in nature. It's who else are they spending time with? Because as we know, we reflect, or it's called, we co-regulate. So we can reflect others people's kind of moods. So if you can obviously get away from people that are stressful and find other means, not only the breath. So I can't really say how long it would take for them to be a bit more parasympathetic, but obviously having techniques and other processes will definitely go a long way to get them there, because I don't know the time course. Depends on how stressed they are and how chronic they have been for that period of time, I suppose.
Can I add to that? question there, Ross, because I've got a few insights. You can calm the sympathetic nervous system down within one breath if you do it well. And some of you will have felt that this evening with Ross's exercises. With chronically stressed people who are very time poor, my yoga friend in Johannesburg, he'll say it's much more effective to do 5 or 10 minutes of something relaxing every day than trying to put in a 90-minute yoga session on a Saturday morning. So can you structure in your day, or help your clients to structure in their day, just a 5-minute time out, maybe mid-morning and mid-afternoon? And then, you know, these exercises that Ross has shared, they can be short. A minute can make a difference. And to me, if you can really calm the sympathetic nervous system, it's got a lasting effect that then takes you into the next hour of work of stress. So yeah, it can have a really nice, long-lasting effect, more than just the few minutes that you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and to that, Ian, I encourage you all to be breathing ninjas. Your breath's with you. You can train it without anyone even knowing or being aware that you're training it. On your commute to work, whether you're in a train, in a car, obviously I'm not encouraging you to hold your breath, but the breathing light, slowing it down, and that kind of cadence piece is really beneficial. As we've seen, well-being is, oh, I need time for exercise, I need time for yoga, meditation, mindfulness. But some of that's intertwined, obviously, within the breath work. But yeah, I'm encouraging all to become breathing ninjas and be working on improving breathing efficiencies without anyone even knowing it, which is incredible.
And then Christina is asking, can people with COPD do all of these exercises?
I think they can. I mean, I don't have much experience in that, so can I look into that and come back to you? Because I know they struggle with collapsed alveoli and the ability to kind of absorb oxygen. So again, it's something that I have not much experience in, but something that I can look into and provide some feedback on.
Thanks, Ross. That's all the questions we've got at the moment. If anyone's got any last-minute questions, just send them through. I'd like to ask you, Ross, how you actually work. Do you do one-on-one breath work with people, or do you do group sessions? What do you find effective?
So it's a combination of that, Ian. So I've worked with athletes on a one-to-one basis, and I've also worked in group settings. So with my kombucha and water kefir business, I ran a kind of fermentation and breathwork session, so teaching them all about how to make my drinks. And also then we go into kind of breathwork and the benefits of it. They're really synergistic in terms of the vagus nerve and those sorts of things. But it really depends on the client. And I've done some great sessions with corporate businesses, obviously, that are looking to reduce anxiety and stress, particularly in the times that we're faced with. Lots of people have loads of different worries. And if we can give them little techniques that can improve them and prevent them from going off ill and those sorts of things, I feel it's really beneficial. So it depends on the individual, really.
And have you got any words of wisdom just to wrap up this session for us tonight?
Words of wisdom.
Because you're a very wise man.
Thank you, but I've got quite a young head on my shoulders, Ian. I mean, I stay curious is my thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Ross. On behalf of all of us, I really appreciate it. And I wish you lots of luck with your business and helping people, motivating people to breathe well, because we all take it for granted. Next month, Ross talked about HRV, and breathing and HRV work really well together. So we have somebody talking about HRV next early September. So breath will definitely come in there. So hopefully you can join us for that. Details will be up on the website in the next day or two.